welcome back to another video. Oh, you guys have a little piece of cat hair on you. Sorry. I wanted to make a video today talking about my relationship with romance and my perception of romance and how it changed with my experience of pretty privilege, where like my kind of going from not having pretty privilege to having pretty privilege and how that's changed my relationship with love. I think that there's a lot of like areas that I can zoom in on, like how looking different has impacted my relationship with food, with friendship, with my career. Like I think like as a woman, your looks feel so central to who you are and how you move through the world. And so I think that like there's a lot of different lenses you can look at it through, but I wanted to look at it through specifically the lens of romance today, because actually I was looking at an old Substack essay that I wrote called I'll stop wanting romance when I stop wanting to be, or I'll stop wanting to be pretty when I stop wanting to be loved. I think I have over 100 essays out, you guys. I forget sometimes the things I've said. Anyway, and it was kind of like about kind of me being on the other end of like becoming prettier and my like how that impacted my relationship with romance. And I feel like especially, so okay, first of all, I just want to say I'm extremely critical of the concept of pretty privilege. I really don't like pretty privilege. I'm going to kind of use it just like for brevity in this video, because I think people kind of understand what you mean when you say pretty privilege, because we do kind of have like a colloquial perception of it, even though I think it's not very robust, and I find it to be quite irritating, but that's for its own video. So really in the context of like when I'm saying pretty privilege, really what I just mean is that like going from a point of having like more attractiveness and like less attractiveness. So when I was at a point in my life where I was like less attractive, I was bald, or there was a point where I had like a little bit of hair and then I dyed it this like Cheeto dust color because I didn't know how to dye your hair blonde, that you needed a toner, so I looked kind of insane. And I was like a solid 60 pounds heavier and just was not, the prettiest version of myself, at least in accordance with conventional attractive beauty standards. When I look like that, that was after a long period of me like really targeting my relationship with beauty, better understanding what beauty meant to me, thinking about what the investment that I had put in being pretty, and trying to show myself that it was quite a waste of time because of the ways in which I had suffered in the pursuit of beauty. And so I really got to this point where like I kind of like had completely forgotten beauty practices, right? Like it was no longer shaving. I obviously shaved my head. I was allowing myself to gain weight. And I was like really in this journey of like kind of also tried to show to myself that whatever I lose in the process of allowing myself to take up more space, literally and figuratively, and put less of an investment in what it is I look like, whatever I lose in the pursuit of that is okay, because that clearly was not something that was worth having in the first place. So I kind of had this intentional like glow down journey, and at that time, whether it was conscious or not, I think that there was a part of me where my knee-jerk assumption was, in doing this, in me allowing myself to exist as not as pretty of a girl, I'm going to have to just be okay with a lack of romantic attention. I'm just going to have to be okay with not being as wanted. And I don't know where I got that narrative from, but I think it was just, I don't know, you grow up and you're watching teen movies, children's movies, where like the fat weird kid in the corner with glasses and pimples on her face and nobody wants her and nobody's into her, and she's so jealous of the popular girl who's skinny and pretty and blonde and whatever, and she has the attention of the hottest guy in school. Just the narrative is very straight there that like you are not going to get love, you are not going to be wanted, nobody's gonna like, there is a beauty hierarchy, and if you are low on the hierarchy, you're not going to be the people at the top, the people, you are not going to be one of the people that is wanted by people from the top of the hierarchy. And you kind of just have to be grateful for whatever sort of attention makes its way to you. So I didn't experience any sort of romantic attention until like early last year, actually when I was at my peak lack of attractiveness. So actually before I even get to that point, because just kind of like moving around with this assumption of like, okay, I guess romance isn't going to really happen for me. And I made my video saying how I stopped hating being a lesbian. And it was around this time, like end of 2024, early 2025, where I sort of just like let go of romance and was like, okay, well, it's just not going to happen for me. And I'm like, that calculation was, albeit rooted in more than just my relationship with beauty and my perception of my own attractiveness. It had a lot to do with like internalized homophobia and like insecurity and anxiety and blah blah blah. So that kind of played, I guess, more of a role. But I was still very much like making that assumption, which I think partially was one of the reasons why I was so comfortable allowing myself to glow down, because I was like, well, I'm not going to want to be wanted at the end of this anyway, so why does it even matter? So I sort of moved on. And then I did end up experiencing a bit of romantic attention, like beginning of 2025, and it was very surprising to me because I just didn't assume that me at my like peak lack of desirability would ever be wanted by someone. And this ended up being a really critical moment for me because I realized that you're never completely disenrolled from the romantic world. You are never completely unwantable. People still see you, people still perceive you, people still have, there's a wide variety of preferences and desires that are informed by quite complex lived experiences that you are always going to kind of be, a part of other people's psychic inner world. Where I was experiencing the attention of someone who had spent a lot of time growing up in my home country, even though they were not from my home country, and found a lot of appeal in me because of the fact that I was kind of like a connection back to this country that this person didn't find very, very easily outside of me. That was not something I could have accounted for when I was kind of making this vow to myself that I was never going to experience romantic love. And so I will say that I think when you lack conventional attractiveness, you do tend to be more the recipient, and might be a hot take, but you do tend to be more the recipient of people's more shallow, disingenuous romantic interests, because not even necessarily that's saying that that's what happened to me, but I do sometimes feel like the way that women who are not as conventionally attractive talk about experiencing romantic love, there is an element of like, I think disrespect towards you is so normalized. People don't really feel the need, especially people who are actually more attractive than you, don't necessarily feel the need to approach you with as much like care and attention and just basic human respect, dignity, as they would someone who's more attractive, because I think in their mind it's like, well, you should just be grateful for this attention, so why should I have to try so hard? Which is not something that I think is obvious to you unless you've kind of experienced both sides. And that's kind of what makes me feel bad. But I'm also not sitting here saying, like every single person who's interested in someone who's not considered conventionally attractive is being disingenuous. That's also like, it's problematic. Beside the point. I think that this ended up being a really like interesting experience for me because I was like, okay, I actually am a contender in the world. Like I am someone who, people can engage with romantically, and it kind of like opened up the gates for me to kind of realize that romance was an option for me. And I shared a little bit of like how that went, I guess, in my like how I stopped hating being lesbian video. So I guess if you want like a little bit more details to that story, it's there. But that ended, like that romantic attention, that experience ended. But like I walked away being like, okay, I guess I was a little short-sighted and kind of having this assumption that like romance was never something that could enter my life. So I that whole year, because that started at the beginning of 2025, and it was beginning of 2025 that I started losing weight, but I didn't experience that attention like a while. It was very early in my weight loss journey, so I was still big. And so like a lot of my weight loss was really connected to my like depression at the time and to my processing of my sexuality. That was more like wrapped up, I guess, in the decisions that I made surrounding losing weight and like glowing up, which I do go into more depth in the other video, but just kind of the TLDR was more so that I felt quite masculinized. I felt quite big and scary. A lot of the stereotypes that we assign towards lesbians, I really felt towards myself, and that was really difficult for me to like sit with as someone who doesn't regard myself as like masculine, or I don't want, most people don't want to be considered big and mean, and I mean big in like a aggressive, hostile, domineering way. Like that's not the way that I think most people want to have to think about themselves, and I felt like I had to think about myself that way, because these were like the stereotypes that we associate with lesbians. So I think I found becoming smaller and becoming more feminine as a means of being able to kind of cope with that. And then also food is just a lot of the ways in which I feel like I'm able to exercise control over my life. So that's kind of what happened. And then time went on, and I remember I had lost a little bit of weight, or I guess at that point like a good amount of weight by the fall semester of 2025 last year. And so I remember one day I was in some cute outfit, and I'd gotten my hair done. At this point I'm not bald anymore. I had these big bouncy black curly hair. It was like maybe like halfway down my back, and I was talking to my crush, this wonderful individual who I found him kind of annoying, but I just, as crushes go, it's not quite logical. This person was very funny and cute to me, and I was ignoring what I found to be quite peculiar. But there was nothing actually wrong with this person. I just like I just whatever. That's not the point. Anyway, so I meet this person and in class, and we're having a conversation one day, and I found myself being able to talk with a sort of conviction and just like, I guess I should really just say like comfort, that an ease, a way of being able to participate in the ping pong match that is flirting, that is showing up as a romantic being in the world, with a lot more, like, just with a lot more comfort. Like, I didn't immediately disenroll myself in the exchange the way I would have just a couple months prior. And so this is kind of where I flip into, experiencing romance a bit from the perspective of someone who had a bit of a glow up. Where now, because, kind of going back to, I guess, the way that I might have received the man when I was less attractive, there was an element of like, I have to show up to this attention, I have to show up to this romantic attention, because like there's a part of me that's always been curious. There's a part of me that's always wanted to test this, both from a side of like, what does it feel like to experience romance, but also what does it feel like to be with a man? And also I'm like never gonna get this attention again, so there's an element of like, well, might as well, like, it's here, see what it's like now, even if this is not someone that I was particularly excited about or found to be all that interesting. I mean, we had, some days, I'm not dragging the man, like, whatever, but I think if I, asked me to cook up someone in my mind, I don't know how close it would have been to him. I think the fact that he was a man was already a thing against him, but beside the point. There was definitely an element of like, I'm not allowed to say no to this, and I definitely think he fetishized me in a lot of ways in that dynamic. That's kind of like a whole other thing to talk about, but I kind of felt that, didn't really know how to process that emotion, but still showed out to it, because I was like, there is not an expectation that someone like me would reject someone like him. So, I just need to kind of go along. Flash forward, like I said, back to being with this girl, or just, having this interaction with this girl. I was like, oh, I feel like I can be here. I feel like I can have this conversation. I feel like I can talk to you at your level. I don't need to go along with whatever your narrative is, with whatever, like, if you are interested in me, then I need to respond to that because I owe you, or because this is going to be a fleeting experience. Like, that was not the way that I felt. And I kind of am extrapolating. I think, it was in flirting with this crush that I had in class, that was the first time that I think I realized, like, oh, I feel like I have, like, a bit of beauty that I can bargain with. I feel like I have something I can bring to the table that makes it so that I'm allowed to have this exchange. That was the first time that thought occurred to me. But generally, like, that understanding was it set a precedent for the way that I engage with romance from that point forward, up until, recent experiences that I've had, that it's like, I can feel comfortable showing up in these dynamics because I feel prettier, which is a really, like, alarming thing to feel, to kind of, like, make this assumption that I am allowed to have this exchange with you, that I'm allowed to feel comfortable, that I'm allowed to say no, that I'm allowed to correct your behavior if it upsets me, that I'm allowed to flirt, because I am not completely, my side of the table is not completely empty, because I have a few poker chips that I can lay. I've never played poker. I think that's what that means. Like, if you have chips, you have things you can bargain with. I don't know. Anyway, but I was like, I feel like I have something, and you then now, need to, you have to treat me like an equal. You have to, see what I'm bringing to the table as being valuable. And it's interesting because it doesn't really stop there, like I had that idea of like, well, I'm going to get prettier and then I'm going to get this attention and then I'll be happy. But then, of course, it only spirals out further. And then, of course, there's just like, oh, but I could lose more weight, or I could optimize this part of myself or this part of myself. The thoughts never end, especially when what you're making, the thoughts to try and become prettier never end, especially when what you are making contingent on beauty is love. Like, what do you completely tie those things together and say, I cannot experience love unless I am more attractive? Then, of course, you're going to spiral. Because I think love is a basic human desire. It's a basic human instinct. And so if it's gone, then, or if what you're telling yourself you need before you can engage with it is something quite frivolous, like prettiness, then you're gonna have a really dysfunctional relationship with being pretty. But it's funny because I have so many examples where I can say, well, I know of X, Y, and Z person who was overweight or had this feature or looked more like me, like I did, looked like more like how I did, early last year, who had like a really beautiful romantic experience. And that's so I don't, there's not irrefutable, it's not an irrefutable claim that you have to be pretty in order to experience romantic love. But my mind still interprets it like that, or my mind might say, well, I want to have the most amount of options. I want to optimize my romantic experiences, and so I have to do that by becoming more attractive, which is a wild cost. But that thought has still been playing out a lot in my head. Like I'm moving pretty soon, and so there's this element of like, if I want to have my best social chances, not just romantically, but even just in friendship, I need to like put effort into becoming prettier. This summer. Um, Summers always feel like they're like boot camp for me. I feel like I'm always trying to like change myself the most in the summer. I was saying on TikTok the other day, it's summers where I hibernate. Most people go out in the summer. I am in my home, locked up, and I like emerge in the fall and winter and whatever. Anyway, not exactly my point, but yeah, I don't know. That was kind of, I guess, me explaining what the different feelings were like, relating to beauty on different sides of the spectrum of being attractive, less attractive, blah, blah, blah. And how romance shows up and registers for you depending on where you are. In some ways, there are some things that are quite similar, which I think, well, no, actually. I was going to make a different point. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye, guys.